Interesting, obviously, day of days in many respects, actually. I guess with lockdown 2.0 on its way, now is the time to go out and rush out and get your toilet rolls and pasta in ahead of tomorrow. Certainly with ministers saying there's been really left with no choice, I guess, to lock us down in order to be able to, once again, save the NHS, being overwhelmed. As far as the minister is concerned, it appears to be an open shut case, but as MPs prepare to vote on lockdown, a number of questions, I guess, remain unchallenged and unanswered. You know, one of the benefits of lockdown, we're being told, is it's been suggested it will provide time to fix England's NHS test and trace system, a system that has routinely, unfortunately, failed to meet its targets. I guess, but solving that one's going to be easier said than done. There's certainly the development of the government policy, normally accompanied by a full assessment of the lockdown is a good idea, has once again failed to happen. They've not looked, again, I'm afraid, at the total cost of lockdown. First time round, if you remember, when we entered into lockdown, there was no assessment of the impact beyond saving lives. Obviously, that's paramount in all of these situations. We start to think about the indirect toll of lockdown from mental health problems and people delaying seeking further health checks for whatever condition they might have, let alone to the economic consequences. So, you know, lots still to be answered, lots of infighting. A nice 2-hour and 15-minute delay last week when Boris basically did his press conference. I'd imagined that was so he could actually watch the rugby, but it would appear that no, it wasn't the rugby. They were still debating internally as to whether or not it was a good idea. Meantime, overnight, we've all been watching avidly, I suspect, the US elections. This appears to cause another period of indecision with legal wranglings being threatened on both sides. Ultimately, democracy is very much in the dock. If America can't make a decision, then you know, the world's largest economic democracy, what does that say about where we are today? I guess American elections look like COVID, or for that matter, Brexit, long-running, destructive, with no clear outcome. Anyhow, forget all that for a second. Today, we tackle an area we can exert some control, at least, and that's M&A. Once again, we've got a brilliant lineup to share, entertain, and educate us on the world of M&A. Agency mergers and acquisitions activity is buoyant just now, with specialist corporate finance teams having a particularly good year. Much like accountants and lawyers, it doesn't really matter whether years are bad or good. The world of M&A chugs along quite nicely, thank you. So what's driving this growth? Is now a good time to be acquired or to be acquiring? What are the marketing sectors that are doing well just now, and what are the pitfalls? So I'd like to introduce our panel, most of whom are actually here, which is great. There's a couple who are just struggling slightly at the moment, rushing to airports and so on. The first panel member I'd like to introduce is David Baaa, who's the founder of and MD of M&A Advisory. He's a fellow of the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants and a member of the Chartered Institute of Marketing. David joined Saatchi & Saatchi as Commercial Director for Eastern Europe, where the business gained market leadership through merger, prior to establishing M&A Advisory nearly 10 years ago. David completed UK and international transactions as Regional Director of Results International, London-based advisory firm. And today, M&A Advisory is a niche boutique that initiates and executes M&A transactions with a sound cultural and business fit in order to maximize shareholder value. The firm focuses its attentions on global marketing communications, digital and MarTech sectors. Welcome, David. Tony Walford brings a wealth of experience from within the marketing communications sector. He's led transactions across many marcoms disciplines, including digital, PR, corporate communications, branding, experiential research and sponsorship, as well as healthcare advertising. He's also advised many agencies on growth strategies and helping them prepare for sale. Having started his career in investment banking with HSBC, he moved into marketing services in 1997, leading a 3i-backed MBO and merging CLK and Michael Peters, formed the leading independent design and communications agency, Corporate Edge. He further augmented the business with a number of strategic acquisitions prior to selling that organization out to a company in Australia, a listed communications group in 2007, realizing 11 times return for investors. He's also a chartered management accountant, a chartered corporate treasurer, and he founded a multi-award winning M&A boutique, Green Square, in 2008. So welcome to you, Tony. Our third expert in space is Doug Baxter from Agency Futures. He's an agency founder and CEO, has worked on growth and digital transformation projects with some of the world's greatest independent agencies. Doug's used his experience of 25 years in the digital technology and content sector to help clients transform and evolve their companies and build their agencies of the future. Now based in London, and Doug has worked exclusively in the US, Asia, and Europe. And Doug leads a team of highly experienced former agency leaders who work with independent agencies across the globe. Paul Willey, who is rushing his way to the airport, will join us shortly, is the owner of Baaa, and Paul has 25 years of hands-on experience of working at a very senior operational network level for Omnicom, one of the world's largest communications organizations. He now runs a boutique consulting firm, partnering with entrepreneurial owners and leaders of marketing communication organizations. He's an accredited mediator by the Center for Effective Dispute Resolution, sometimes a skill that is required when it comes to M&A. And he sits on several professional organizational panels. Annabel Dunstan is the founder and CEO of Question and Retain. With a degree in anthropology, Annabel began her career as a lumberjack's assistant before becoming a ski guide and then a sailing instructor before she entered the world of communications, I hazard to guess. In 2003, Annabel joined Three Monkeys Communications. She was appointed MD 3 years later, overseeing growth of the award-winning top 50 PR consultancy with £7.5 million revenue with 75 consultants. Annabel left the PR jungle in 2011 to found her own consultancy, Gain and Retain, help businesses looking to grow through attracting and growing talented people and winning great clients. Question and Retain was launched in 2012, adding measurement tools to the mix, specifically employee experience, client and membership satisfaction. And then finally, we have with us Guy McConnell, who started his career in a small below-the-line agency called Black Cat. Joining as their second employee, Guy reached the board in his late 20s and saw the agency grow to over 150 people. In 2000, he was part of the management team that was sold to WPP, where it became part of JWT. In 2005, he set up a brand response agency called Burn with Julie Cheetham. The agency specializes in data-driven marketing, direct marketing, CRM, and digital. And over the years, the agency has won over 35, including being voted the UK's #1 CRM agency for 5 out of the last 6 years. The pair sold the agency last month to Selby Anderson, a fast-growing marketing communications group. So what we have is basically 4 experts in M&A, a agency owner that's just gone through M&A, and Annabel, who very much understands the kind of people impact that M&A can have. So welcome all of you. Thank you very much for joining us. We've got a good number of people on today's call. I'm keen to try and open up the call to questions 10 minutes before the end. So I'll get cracking really. First question, if I may, I'm going to direct to Doug. Doug, what's fueling the growth at the moment of all of these acquisitions and mergers?
I think there's a number of factors. I think the whole situation that we are going through is really acting as a catalyzing factor, where you've got a change in the nature of the buyers. It used to be the holding groups, and the holding groups really are in no real position to buy. We were discussing this in our prep call, where Mark Reed said they're on the acquisition trail again. And in the immortal words of Mandy Pearl White, I think, well, he would say that, wouldn't he? They really aren't in a position to, they can't even afford to do the restructuring plan. So there's a lot of these holding groups that really need to shed companies and get back to core companies. So that's giving opportunities for people to buy themselves out of holding groups. There's also a lot of agencies that have been slow to evolve to a data and digital driven business. And now they're realizing the real impact that the COVID pandemic has had in accelerating the behavior of all audiences towards digital. So they're realizing they need to catch up. So at the moment, I've actually got several briefs from a combination of PR and integrated agencies saying, listen, we urgently need to hire digital resources because we have clients asking us to build experiences and different kinds of influence social marketing, and we just don't have the resources to be able to do that, to get them into e-commerce. So that's also fueling it. There's a whole raft of startups that we see every day. I saw more in Campaign this morning. And so all of this whole situation is giving rise, as well as consolidation. There's a defensive measure where a lot of agencies are looking at it and saying, well, you know, we really don't know if we can survive, or I really don't want to be worrying anymore. I'd prefer to somehow get involved with a group that can give us a more assured future and pipeline of business, and we know we can grow within. So all of these factors are coming together and creating really a burst of activity that should sustain for the next 12, 18 months. Also, just another couple of factors. There's the potential change in tax rates, where you're going to have a change in capital gains. And so a lot of owners are realizing, well, perhaps I should be looking at selling now before it makes a real material difference to the value that I can get from my principal asset. So there's a huge amount happening that's causing almost a frenzy in the market.
Thank you. David, I mean, obviously you're working across a number of different sectors, I know. Are there particular sectors that are frothy?
I don't know about frothy, but there's a good demand I'm finding right across the sector. You know, we're working for PR consultancies, we're working for digital agencies, and all of those companies, we're getting more, you know, a number of buyers interested in each client. So there's clearly a lot of demand out there. And I think it's actually really perversely, it's hard to imagine, but I think it's a little bit of a seller's market at the moment, because a lot of sellers aren't coming forward because they've suffered a little bit through COVID. And they're thinking, oh, this is not a good time to put my business on the market because, you know, people will see me as a fire sale or something like that. But that's not the case at all. You know, we're seeing very good multiples paid for businesses, and we're seeing a number of buyers chasing each sell-side client. So and that, as I say, that's right across the sector, from PR, digital, etc.
Okay, I mean, and Tony, I mean, to build on that, thank you, David. Are you witnessing the acquisition side coming from outside of the UK, or are that UK agency groups and VCs and so on looking to?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's like what Doug was saying about the CGT changes are kind of driving things a little bit, because people are concerned about capital gains tax going up in March and losing the benefits that we might have there. But, you know, you've got to resist scaremongering people into doing transactions. I think, yeah, we're looking at that though. You sort of think you'd see a lot of UK businesses coming to market. But when I look across our current mandates, we are running 7 mandates at the moment, of which 1 is in the Netherlands. They're all quite sizable. So our clients are between 1 and 4 million EBIT. So our deal sizes are between 10 up to about 75 million is where they sit. And, you know, there was, when we first went into lockdown back in March, there was a bit of a slowdown because no one knew where we were going. We actually stopped billing our clients retainers. Last retainers we charged at that point was the end of February, because we just felt, although we're still working on their jobs, it didn't seem right to be charging them sort of, you know, 10 grand a month when we weren't sure where things were going. The market slowed a bit, but it came back quite aggressively in August as people decided they wanted to do things again. We currently have, in terms of overseas, we've, well, in terms of acquire appetite overseas, that hasn't really changed. I mean, whilst, as Doug said, the major groups aren't doing much, WPP did buy a French customer experience outfit called Velvet last week, I think. And Omnicom's Credera bought a company called DMW Group in the UK and London, which is in digital transformation. So those are markets where people are still very active. Havas are very acquisitive at the moment. Obviously they're French, but run a lot of stuff out of the UK. And they recently sold 10% of Universal Music, which was what Vivendi did, for $3 billion. So they've got a pretty big war chest. And they're very active across customer experience, user experience, content, those sort of areas. Where there's plenty of demand is certainly across the healthcare marketing side, digital transformation, data visualization and content. And that's where we've got a lot of clients in those fields. But yeah, we're running, we've got 7 mandates, and 2 of the overseas ones coming in. One's in San Francisco and one's in Sweden. And those are not driven by capital gains tax changes. They're just market movement.
Okay, I mean, for those that are unfamiliar really with the process of M&A, and maybe agency owners on this call, can you briefly describe the process? And maybe be different from how you approach it to how David approaches it, but in sort of top line, could you give us some idea as to how it works?
How it works? Okay, well, normally what happens is we work sell side, so we'll be approached by an agency who wants to go to market for various reasons. We'll then get involved with them and understand exactly why they want to go to market. We'll then look across the 7 things that acquirers look at, which is basically the discipline. What does it do? And is that attractive in the market? How are they positioned in the market? We'll look at their clients, the nature of their clients, the spread of their clients, the type of verticals they're in, their team, and whether their team are motivated and properly incentivized. And this is where Annabelle's specialism is making sure they're all properly locked in and will be there on the journey. Obviously, we look at financials, we look at their growth strategy, because that's why acquirers pay a premium for businesses. They're buying growth, not something that's flatlining. And we look at stability. So there are any single factors that mean, the thing could fall over. So it could be a single person reliance, it could be a client over reliance, it could be a sector that's in decline, it could be any of those sort of areas that could be hit. So we look at those first, and then what we do is we pull together a thing called information memorandum and a buyer list. The IM's the most important thing you'll ever write about your business, because it is the selling document. And that is very candid. It has everything in it, across your service offering, who the key players are, and everything you need to send to acquirers. We then put together what's called a teaser or a preliminary that's anonymous. And that will go to a list of buyers that we agree with the client. We don't have a fodder list of buyers at Green Square, the people we go to every time. We bake fresh every day. So we do global research as to who the best fit will be for that business, strategically and financially. So we look at it and say, where do you want to be? We then sit down with the owners as part of that process to understand what their real aspirations are, not just financial, how much money do I want, but whether they want to be in 3 years' time personally, because meeting personal aspirations is key. So once we've understood all that, we then sort of distill the buyer list, and we will go out with the anonymous one-sider and the NDA to those buyers. The ones we know we can pick up the phone to and get them to sign the NDA. Once the NDA is in, out goes the information memorandum. You then have a period of around 4 to 6 weeks of chemistry meetings with buyers and sellers. And that period, interestingly, has been sped up during COVID because everyone's on video. So before, a lot of things would get delayed by people arranging flights and who can be where in different places. Now, we did one the other day and we had people from Belgium, the Netherlands, Paris, the US, and us in the UK all on the call. And a decision could be made quickly, go, no go. So you'll end up with 3 or 4 partners that could acquire you. You'll then have a situation where, to be honest, all our clients have always said, that's the one I want to be with out of these people. And our job then becomes to drive the best deal structure for them. So that's what we'll do. You get to heads of terms. Once you sign heads of terms are really important. That's the thing that sets out what the deal looks like. This isn't your selling document. And once you sign it, you're not legally bound to complete. But once you sign it, you are into exclusivity, which means you can't talk to any other buyers for about 90 days, 90 to 120 days. And that's because the buyer is now going to perform due diligence, and that's really expensive. So buyers are in for 200,000 or 300,000 per transaction, which is why the bigger transactions count, because whether it's small or big, it's still the same amount of money. Once you're into due diligence, that's like a massive audit. You go through all these things. The share purchase agreement will be drawn up at the same time, which should reflect the heads of terms. So get any deal breakers agreed by the time of the heads. So you're not arguing during the other process when you're writing the share purchase agreement. So you run through that, and then we sit alongside our clients through due diligence. We'll do a whole load of financials around excess working capital, how the transactions can be structured, pull all that together. And then at the end of it, you sign up and grab a glass of champagne and receive your payment. So, so in a nutshell, that's the process. They take 6 to 9 months. So it's pretty full on, pretty intensive.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, obviously, it's different, I guess, for you, David, because obviously you're dealing. I mean, the process will be similar, but obviously you're dealing both with the seller and the buyer, not at the same time. Obviously,
No, not really, Stephen. I mean, our process is probably pretty identical to Tony's. Most of our work is sell side. Very occasionally, about 10% of our work is on buy side mandates, and we still like to to do those where buyers ask us, but most of our work is sell side. The only thing I'd say I'd like to add about the process in all of this is that I believe there are three elements into any deal that is done to make it a success, and we focus very much on that. And those three elements are a good chemistry between the parties, a cultural match, and an outstanding business proposition. And that's what we really focus on. So the chemistry meeting ticks off the chemistry element, and we also test the cultural element, which is really not so much a geographic cultural element, it's actually the way the business works, the way we do things out around here, a style of working. And that's extremely important. So we make sure any buyer and seller, when we match them up, have a similar style of working. But the biggest part of it all is the business proposition, where the two parties sit down and they say, if we do a deal together, what will we look like post-deal? And it's so important to have an outstanding business proposition, you know, the reason for the deal at the end of the day. And generally, the buyer with the most outstanding business proposition will be able to pay the best price. But that's not always the case, and hence that's the negotiation stage later on. So yeah, so that I think that's an emphasis, a great emphasis as a business we play on that. But generally, the process itself is very much similar.
Yeah, just seconding that, the chemistry and culture is so important, because if that isn't right, the deal won't be a success. And as most transactions involve an earn-out element, if you haven't got the chemistry and culture right, that's when it fall down and people won't see their earn-out. So that's so important. And the other thing is the post-transaction integration. So what you should be doing as you run through the process, what I was gallivanting through in case I was boring people, is making sure that everybody understands what's going to happen on day one in the new enterprise. So you don't have people suddenly turning up, they've been sold and they don't know what their job is. So the post-acquisition integration planning is absolutely critical. And we've done a lot of that with things like Vista, which went into ICF, where they've ended up running basically ICF Next for Europe. So people knew they had different jobs when they went in. But yeah, I mean, Dave's absolutely right on the culture, and the proposition is bang on the money.
Let's talk about culture a little bit, and I'd like to bring in, if I may, Annabelle, and talk about people, because I know obviously in that due diligence period, obviously you're looking at the financials of the business, as you say, you're looking at the business proposition, and so on and so forth. Increasingly, I think, you know, as part of an M&A process, people obviously are also looking at the most fundamental thing in all these transactions is the people. Annabelle, your business, you know, focuses and works in that space and helps support not just M&A, obviously, but you're working between agency and client relationships and all sorts of things. Talk to me about actually how do you prepare people for a transaction like this, and how would you value the people asset?
Thanks, Stephen. I feel like I'm in the Hall of Fame with these M&A experts. So fascinating to have you all on one panel, and all credit to Pimento that you've attracted them here. My area is very niche. It is the people diligence, the human diligence, if you will. And I talk to a lot of agency owners who have that classic, yeah, we'd like to sell in 3 to 5 years, particularly the smaller independent agencies that we work with. And my advice and counsel is to prepare early, particularly as a vendor. You can never start too early to make sure that all your people processes, how you listen to your staff, how you empathise with them, how you understand what they're feeling and thinking, and how to create the best environment for them, needs to start really early, so that you're really front-footed, so that if you are the target of acquisition, you can go almost with a vendor pack ready to say that your people are fit and that the company is fit for sale. And you can really describe your culture, how you manage meetings, what your values are, and purpose. No one's mentioned purpose yet, which I'd like to flag. What is the purpose of your business? So that when you are acquired, you merge or you're bought, that the new purpose, your employees will feel comfortable with that new purpose. So there's a whole lot of work you can be doing right now, even if you're not selling tomorrow or next week, to get people fit.
Can I just add to that a little, that there is a process. When people decide to sell, they should, if they sell immediately or look to sell immediately, they're probably not going to get the value out of their business that they would get if they did proper structured exit planning. And exit planning is a process from which you can prepare yourself, you can prepare your organization, and you can prepare your talent for the process of the agency either acquiring, being acquired, or being so, even more so now is a really good time for internal transitions. So with proper exit planning, you know, you look at what your needs are, you look at what you need to achieve from the business, you look at your staff, you look at what leadership you need, you look at how to plan that. And ideally, it's been shown that if you're going to get the best price, and if you're going to avoid your agency being discounted by the buyers, you really need somewhere between about 18 months and 3 years of exit planning in order to make sure that your business is as strong as it can be.
My mantra as well is that, you know, happy team is happy client, and that sounds a bit American, but if you've got people who are engaged running up the escalators to work or running to their desk in their bedroom at the moment, and going the extra mile, then they're going to give better service to clients. Happy clients, they will do more with you, grow with you, and recommend you to their network. So it's not just preparing for sale, it's having a really ship-shape culture where you're people-centric to ensure best practice.
Totally agree on that one. If I can now bring Guy McConnell into this conversation. Guy, you've been through a recent sale of your business, and you've done it once or twice before too. And I'd just be interested to know, first of all, selling a business during COVID, did that present a different set of issues or problems? And obviously, secondly, too, how do you deal with the management of the cultural change in the way in which you're managing the business, or is there no cultural change?
To answer your first question, Stephen, probably the biggest effect was we had a slightly stop-start process as a result of COVID. So our discussions we were approached probably 15 months ago by a potential acquirer who we were having discussions with. We had a second acquirer approach us 3 months after that. And we were having very good, strong conversations with that second acquirer until March. March, everything was put on hold, that we were quite close to heads of terms, and everything was put on hold due to the lockdown. So at that point, we felt that deal was probably could have been done by then. So there was a sort of sense that we probably would just get on with business as usual after that. We were actually approached by a third potential acquirer during the lockdown period, and that prompted us to go back to number two, who we eventually sold to, and asked them whether they were back in the game, whether they were up for starting conversations again, and thankfully they were, and they were the ones that all along we had our eye on. Tony and David both talking about cultural fit and chemistry, and it was pretty clear. I think Tony said that his clients know pretty much instantaneously who they want to be dealing with, and we knew as well. So the third acquirer that approached us, or potential acquirer, prompted us to go back to number two, who we were most interested in. And actually that they were back, the sort of brakes were off from an acquisition point of view from their perspective at that point, and that's when the deal started flowing through again. So it was a bit stop-start, and that was definitely down to the COVID situation. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the cultural side, we were, I think, I don't know how common this is, to be honest, and it certainly didn't happen the first to the same extent on the first deal I was involved in many years ago, but on this deal, the acquirer who purchased Burn was very interested in knowing what our internal culture was like. So they were, it wasn't just about financials for them. It wasn't just about the legals for them. It was about understanding how we interacted as a team, how we worked together. Essentially what was the culture of the organisation they were buying, and how would it match up with the organisation that we were going into. And that actually gave us a lot of reassurance, because it felt like it was more than just a sort of faceless financial purchase, and much more about, trying to bring two parties together to make something bigger than the sum of the parts, as it were. So So yeah, I mean, I think the whole cultural fit area is really vital for successful deals to go through.
Okay, and the valuation of your business wasn't damaged by COVID and the fact that you weren't actually all sitting in an office?
No, we were lucky again with the acquirer, Selby Anderson. They were very I think sort of far-sighted in a way, because of course our revenues went down, our gross profit went down during COVID, but we were always making money, and whilst the money wasn't the same as we were making in previous years, I think the way that they looked at our business was to say, well, look, this is a unique situation, it's a blip. We're looking at whether or not you're a solid business. If you can survive this and you can still make money during a downturn like this, it looks to us like you're a business that that is going to rebound quite successfully. When sort of we get out of lockdown and hopefully we have a vaccine and things start moving back to normal. So our valuation was not based on our lockdown figures, if you like, our COVID figures, but on previous years, and I think that was, obviously from our perspective, it was also what made the deal go through, because we weren't interested in selling in a downturn.
Thank you. Thanks for that. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of businesses at the moment that aren't in a particularly good shape and that have suffered dramatically through COVID. But as you were sort of suggesting, that underlying business strength is good. Really, to the M&A specialists on the call, if you have a business and you're running a business, either within Pimento or outside of Pimento, that is struggling either because you've overtraded and your cash flow position is poor, are there buyers for those sorts of businesses at the moment? Are there people basically willing to actually take businesses that don't necessarily conform to their ideal, but they can see the future value and they're prepared to basically either partner with them or cash flow them in? David?
Yeah, I think there's two elements here. As Guy's described, I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's a little bit of a seller's market at the moment, and I think there's a real shortage of top quality businesses around. And the buyers are actually prepared to give a little bit of quarter to sellers of businesses. They're not going to take them on their actual COVID results. They're going to give them a little bit of license and perhaps look at pre-COVID or base it on current revenues if they've started to come out of COVID. So that's one element. And I think the second one, okay, those businesses that have suffered in COVID and, quite badly and feel they might be better as part of something else to really grow again. I think there's plenty of demand for those sorts of businesses, sort of merging type situations, and they can get paid quite well, and they can have a slice of a bigger cake for the future. So that there's opportunities there as well.
Thank you. And Doug, one for you, and then Tony, perhaps you could also answer this. In terms of the people who are out there who are actively buying at the moment, what if it's not the traditional agency groups? And I know Tony gave a couple of examples of deals that have been done by the groups recently, but in general, it appears that the buyers are coming from elsewhere. What sort of organisations are they?
There's 3 or 4 either new or different types of buyers, as far as I see it. There's quite a lot of new international buyers that are out there that are keen to expand their geographic reach. So, for instance, some of the Asian buyers, people like Blue Focus, Blue Impact, coming in from China, and they've been pretty assertive in the US market, and they're looking to expand internationally as well. So it's interesting, and Dentsu have, for the last few years, have also been a steady acquirer. So a lot of new internationals, both Australasia and Asia, and also from Europe. We've seen some governments in Europe, actually, where they see problems with economic growth in their home countries, are now giving grants to companies to purchase overseas. So that's fueling some growth from countries like France and Italy as well. There's venture capital money. So, for instance, I'm involved with purchasing companies in Los Angeles at the moment, where I was working for a influencer platform that's backed by venture capital money. So venture capital money is increasingly attracted to the marketing services sector, where they see a lot of value now. And particularly with technology, meaning that there's the opportunity of much greater value in 3-5 years, and much steady recurring revenue models that they can feel that they can invest in. Then you've also got people like the consultancies, which have been for the last creative and by digital. And finally, a good example, if you don't mind, I'll speak for Paul Woolley, who's not here, but he was giving a really good example of a transaction that he's handling, where in a specific country where there's 3 agencies coming together that realize that between the 3 of them, they can make this massive, very efficient model of cost savings. So the idea of these roll-ups where agencies are getting together in sectors or geographies where they have synergies, where they can realize cost savings, and where they feel like if they can get together now, create a much more effective business model, then when the growth comes again, be it in 21, 22, then they'll be in a very strong position to grow. So there's a number of new models. Tony, what do you think? Any other good ones there that you see?
Not really. I think you've covered virtually all of them off. I mean, on the PE-backed side, that's probably where we're seeing a lot of activity, because we discussed earlier, the holding company groups, whilst they have sort of woken up again in the last couple of weeks, they're still not as aggressive as they used to be. I think the private equity firms coming in, they want 2 things. Either they're going to buy a business as a platform, in which case, you know, we're asked by people like Living Bridge for things, and they'd like to see a potential for 5 million EBITDA, and they want a platform. But they will buy smaller things as platforms. So, for example, they bought Brain Juicer, and then once they've actually done that and invested in it as a platform, they will look for things for that platform to buy. So sometimes we have PE firms that actually want something big to be their platform. Other times it'll be where they've actually got a portfolio company they want to augment. And they've got a lot of cash at the moment. The management consultancies, less so at the moment, I'd say. Accenture is probably the biggest spender during the whole period running up to all of this anyway, followed by Deloitte Digital, PwC, EY, KPMG, less so. They sort of dabble in the market, but they don't sort of really get into it. People like ICF, which is a big listed US consultancy, they're moving quite quickly. Advantage Swan's another one we've sold into in the past, who bought into marketing. They're $1 billion listed NASDAQ business. But I think the overseas acquirers, I'll say, are predominantly the most active at the moment.
So Tony, when you talk about platform, do you mean like an anchor tenant? So basically something.
Yeah, exactly, an anchor tenant. So, you know, so if you take that Living Bridge example where they invested in Brain Juicer, Brain Juicer are looking for either trade or PE. They talked to a number of different people, but ultimately as Living Bridge invested in them. And they're then looking to augment Brain Juicer through other acquisitions. So they will go out and look for things. And these are sort of things that may, when you talk about distressed type of businesses, they're the sort of things that will look for capability. So they may look for something that maybe not necessarily Brain Juice, because that's very digitally driven, but where you do see distressed things happening, it's often where there's been specific niche capability and you can hoover up a team of people to bring something new to your organization, or use them to take on existing work that you've already got. We don't, because of the fact we're geared to do things that are at least $1 million EBITDA, we generally don't do much distress, so we don't have much experience in that market really.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you for that. Can I go back and talk about kind of the emotional impact of sale and bring Anna back into the conversation? I spoke to an agency owner a couple of weeks ago, in fact, who had been through a transaction, and it'd been a business that he'd built up over 10, 15 years. And, you know, it was his life's work, and he exited and had a pile of cash. That was fantastic. But actually, suddenly, you know, emotionally, he felt very disconnected. He actually became depressed and became very anxious, and he sort of came off that cliff. And yeah, you know, as I say, had a big bank account, but actually he wasn't very happy. Is that common? Is that a typical reaction to an agency sale?
I have seen that without mentioning names, and it's partly because that person suddenly goes through a sudden loss of purpose. They don't need to get up and do the same things they were doing to drive something forward. Money, as we know, doesn't make you happy. It's great if you've got what you need, but it doesn't necessarily make you the happiest person. So I think it's really important that business owners selling need to plan for what next and what's going to come after, and to remember they've got a considerable bank of skills and experience that's kind of waiting to be used elsewhere. So definitely part of the exit is to plan, what are you going to do next? Yes, take a break. If buying a yacht is your thing, go do that. But then what can you do? What can you give back? How can you encourage the next generation coming through? So I think whilst it's good sometimes to have space and actually recover from the arduous 6-9 month process of sale, do have back of mind that at some point, 3 months, 6 months after sale, it would be useful to have something that can really channel that considerable energy that you've been putting in as an entrepreneur and as a business owner to that point, certainly.
Okay,
well, what I'd like to do now, if I may, is open up the call to...
I'll just add to that. Sorry. Stephen, I just wanted to add to that, though, in terms of going back to something I mentioned earlier about having the culture fit and the chemistry and the outstanding business proposition. It's a job of an M&A advisor to really understand before the sale what the seller is looking for. And, we don't often just treat it as there's circumstances where if the buyer wants an exit, he can get an exit, and if he wants to retire or something like that. But generally, a lot of sellers, this is their life's work, building that business, and their sale is all about getting the business to play on a bigger stage rather than just making the money. And very often they would still like an involvement. If they're joining a larger group, they actually might want a whole new job, or if not, they want to be a non-executive on the business and be involved in helping to continue to grow that business. So I think that's really important, that when you work with an M&A advisor, you have a real choice about the type of buyer and the buyer's proposition, and that way you'll never have that situation where the seller is kind of in a situation where he didn't want to be.
No, that's a very, very important point. And I think often, obviously, it's almost the unintended consequences of sale. I mean, when we've heard of the apocryphal stories where basically agency sales have gone through and they've been presented with divorce papers at that particular point in time. We've also heard, obviously, about the impact it has on the employees. And actually, at what point, I guess, and again, Annabelle, one for you, what point do you actually engage with your employees and actually make them aware of the impending sale? Obviously, sometimes these things are highly confidential and it's very difficult to be able to bring them into the conversation.
Yeah, and culture, why people turn up for work and show up, is really important in day-to-day life as an employee, and often the leadership team are the cultural touchstone for how work is for people. So yes, with confidentiality, much cannot be discussed, but you can get people aligned with being open to change. So understanding who can be agile, and having a culture that shows agility can lead to strength and opportunities for people. So having a culture that's open to change before the news is announced is really key. And then internal communications, the best deals I've seen have been when all that's done in advance and there's preparation, so that on deal day, it's really clear and really clearly communicated, so that employees feel safe, they know where they're going, what their role is, and to be excited about the future. So it's all in the preparation, internal comms, but also having a culture that's fit for change.
Guy, when you went through your recent sale, at what point were you able to bring the rest of the agency in? I know it's a relatively speaking small agency in terms of headcount, but when could you have that conversation with them?
It didn't happen till after the deal had gone through, Stephen, and that's for confidentiality reasons. We also didn't want to create a sort of sense of unease. People don't necessarily know the full ramifications of what a deal's going to mean for them. In our case, it means business as usual, and it means nothing changes. So we were very quickly able to reassure everyone that the deal that we had agreed and the acquirer we had agreed to deal with had no intentions of changing anything about Burn. We were very lucky as part of why we chose the acquirer that we did. They were not looking to merge us with anyone else. They were not looking to change our name. They were not looking to change our culture. They were not looking to. They really did want business as usual from us. And the advantage for our staff was we knew that the impact on them would be very limited beyond another name over the door, effectively. So yeah, the answer to your question is we had to wait really until the deal was fully concluded and then manage the communications from there. But we have a small team, as you point out. It's a small team. It's a tight knit team. There's a degree of sort of, I believe, trust within the organisation anyway, that we would not sell anyone down the river, and so it felt a little bit easier for us to potentially manage than it would be in a much larger organisation.
One final question for you all, if I may, before we go to questions across the viewership today. And I would just remind everyone, and it's a great opportunity to ask questions of people who are expert in this chosen field. It's not often we get people this qualified in the M&A space all together at the same time. So this question really relates to kind of the changes in the tax law, and if it does go through, how will that change M&A in the future, and how will owners realise their life's work? Anyone on that one? Tony?
Yeah, I'll pick it up if you like. Well, first of all, we don't know if it's going to change. In all the years I've been doing this, which is a very long time, there's always some threat to capital gains tax, and there's always a bunch of M&A advisors that run out on a Sunday time saying you must sell before this time because they're going to take away taper relief, or they're going to take away entrepreneurs relief, and scaremongering. And that's happened, and people have sold, and then things haven't changed in the tax position. This time round, I think it's slightly different. We don't know how the government is going to pay for all the money that's been spent on what's been going on and continues to be spent. The reason why I think capital gains tax will get hit is because it's not only an easy target, it just sends a message to people that are wealthy and making lots of money in a capitalist manner will not be able to carry on doing that. Personally, I think it's a bit silly because it discourages entrepreneurialism. Plus, if they actually change capital gains tax and align it with income tax, the information I saw is they're going to make about 13 to 16 billion quid out of it, which is the equivalent of us lot going down the pub and having a couple of pints of beer or a couple of glasses of wine in the grand scheme of things. So, I think it's a bit pointless. But that said, if it happens, what will happen? If it's aligned to income tax, then clearly people are going to be less motivated to sell their business for capital gains purposes because the take is going to be quite a bit lower. At the moment, it's 10% is the capital gains tax you pay on the first million under entrepreneurs relief, and 20% on top of that. So if they align it to income tax, it's effectively going to cost you 20% more on anything over $1 million. So that's a fair chunk. I think it'll take time to settle down. I don't think people will immediately say, right, that's it, I'm never going to start a business, I'm not going to do things. I think people will carry on starting businesses, but maybe they'll take more time about selling. Maybe they'll be more considered about that. They'll look to maximize the value when they can get it. It's a bit unknown territory, to be honest. I do think it'll be quite damaging because this is an economy that thrives and has done for many, many years on building businesses and building enterprise to realize value. It's very different to places like Germany where they keep them in family for years and years and years. But it could be just become more European about it. I don't know. But I think it will have an impact, definitely have an impact. We're seeing a bit of a rush to market now. So we're being quite picky on what we're taking on, because those businesses are rushing to market to simply beat the capital gains tax potential hike. You could have a situation where buyers actually knock the multiples down a little bit because they know they need to sell. In which case, if you end up getting a multiple of 4 instead of 5 up front, you've effectively given away 20% anyway. So you might as well have suffered the tax. It hasn't made any difference. So we're fairly pragmatic.
Can I answer that as well? Because I think you're absolutely right in terms of it will make an impact to the way that people look at these things.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've seen, because it's almost definite that there's going to be a change in the US in this. So this conversation was has been going for a little while longer over there. So one of the forms of change of ownership or change of structure that's often overlooked, but gets people more value in the long run, is passive ownership. And I think that passive ownership will come back again as something that owners should look at. So if you are depending on your business, if you're going to sell your business to an external buyer and to an internal team, you're going to get, you know, somewhere between 4 and, in an ideal world, 9-10 times your EBITDA of that money. But you're going to have to work for the next 3-4 years to get the earnout. And, you know, at the end of that period, you're not going to have your business. Whereas the data shows that if owners find the right person to run their business, they can make that money through 9 or 10 years and grow the business. And then at the end of that period, they'll still run their owners, right? So you might decide that, okay, well, I don't want to be involved in the day-to-day running because, you know, I've got other things to do. I want to move on to the next chapter of my life. Passive ownership can be a really good way to do that, providing you have somebody that you can trust and that you manage that risk and that you keep in touch with the business. That will probably get you more money every time. And that's why, you know, I like to really be very agnostic about the options for owners in terms of, okay, what are your goals? As everybody has said, as David said, and as Tony has said, make sure that you really understand the goals and then present them with the full suite of external, internal, but also passive ownership. And we had one case where we were working, I'll tell you the name of the company, Spectrum Science, and in the US, which is a great healthcare company. Tony, you were talking about the growth of healthcare. And this is one of the pioneers. They really, they were a general sciences company. And then the owner, John Seng, bought an English guy in, actually Welsh to be more specific in, and he took the company from a 6 million turnover, doing about 15%, to a 32 million turnover, doing about 25% margin within 3 or 4 years. And the owner was no longer involved, right? So he found absolutely the perfect person to run his business. And he ended up selling that person. The guy's name is Jonathan Wilson. You could look it up, Prosper Group, or I still have an involvement in the US. I believe they have a case study on it. But so it can be a tremendous way to look at deriving the value out of the business and still owning it. Sorry if that was a bit long.
Yeah.
No, I think 51% ownership you'll see as well. I think there'll be a lot more moves toward not 100% on day one. David.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I mean, first of all, in theory, you shouldn't be tax driven whether you sell, you know, your decision regarding your agency shouldn't be a tax driven one. But I can certainly see where you've got attractive rates of tax, people will sell or not sell accordingly. The sad thing about our industry, it's not an industry that you can pass on to your children. If you own a decent sized marketing company, it's not something you can pass on to your children because it has to be, you know, we all know the amount of passion that has to go in and hard work that goes into these businesses. And unless you're really cut out for it, you can't just pass it to your son or daughter. Regarding, you know, passive ownership, I think that is a good idea, but the downside on that is getting the wrong person running your business. I have seen, you know, over 20 years of doing this, some horrendous disaster stories of people recruiting a senior level person that's the wrong person, or not handing over to them properly. And I've seen some pretty bad car crashes during that. And I think the other nature of our industry is it constantly needs to reinvent itself. So companies have to go through this sort of mergers and acquisition process very often to actually, you know, get the best value for themselves, rather than just going to a point where they start going into decline and that sort of thing. So I think there's arguments either way, but I think the entrepreneurs relief was a very good system because it encouraged people to sell and get businesses to be recycled rather than just go into a zombie state, which I've seen many times.
Yeah, I mean, one great example, and Annabelle mentioned it, David, and I think most of us are familiar with it, was the example of Caroline Kersey at Circle PR, who now about 2.5 years ago decided basically to step back from the day-to-day running the business. Ruth came in and succeeded her in running the business, and they actually then set up an employee owner-based business and gave away, I think, from memory, I think it was about 30-40% of the business. I believe we've got somebody on the call who works there. So, you know, there are, 60% was given away. So, you know, it does demonstrate if you can get the right person, and obviously in Ruth they found the right person, it can work very well. But equally too, if you get it horribly wrong, it can destroy shareholder value. They have questions, but people basically, the questions they're asking are actually quite personal. And I'm just thinking perhaps what we should probably do is, I will obviously make available after this call all of the contacts of all the people who have been on today's panel. So if you have a particular question or you'd like to engage or discuss with any of the experts on today's panel, then you can do so. I will be sharing also after this a couple of other items. As ever, we've had on today's call the wonderful Ralph Mann from Purple Heron, who's been illustrating the presentation. So there's a takeaway for all of you, and there will be obviously the video on Pimento catch up. One thing I did want to mention is tonight we've got the Pimento 5 PM Club. This time it will be hosted by Nathan Lomax, who many of you know, who's the MD and joint founder of Quickfire Digital. If you haven't already signed up for that, there is a link that Isabel's just about to publish, or you can just give her a call or send her an email and we can get you on the list for tonight. I think we've got 55 people currently registered to join us. It's a really good networking opportunity. We have a series of breakout rooms. You bring the booze and we will organise the event. Next Wednesday, the call will be the turn of the management. We've got John Bailey from Proco, who's just completed a mega merger, creating one of the UK's largest independent print and digital businesses. He'll be joined by Sami Morsapar, who's the joint founder and MD Agency UK, and Catherine Strachan, who's CEO of Copy House. And they're going to be discussing the trials and tribulations of managing a lockdown situation again, and how, despite COVID, they've all grown their businesses in 2020. And finally, kind of a footnote really, and something I think we should all remember, is that obviously the industry is going through structural change at the moment. The impact on that has been considerable on people. Many agencies have had to basically lose talent at this time. For that reason, we've set up a program called What Next? It's an outplacement service. It's getting great reviews at the moment. We have 10 places available for any agency head that would like to offer a bronze placement for free to one of their or more of their team members that they've had to let go in the last few weeks. So if you have somebody who you know would benefit from basically help with brushing up their CV, working out how they're going to get back into work, how to go about the whole process, then please just send me an email, introduce them to me, and we will basically give them a free place on our pilot that we're running next week. I think the pilot's next Tuesday. So do let me know as soon as you possibly can. Thank you to our panel. It's now midday. We've unfortunately run out of time. We never have enough time for these things, do we? They're always shorter than they should be. It's been really good, really insightful. And I'd like to thank all of them. I'd love to give each of you more airtime. Unfortunately, it's always a tricky balance to get everybody on. But thank you, and I look forward to sharing this content with those people that couldn't be on today's call. And see you all very soon. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Thank you.